Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum Muslim mamas. My name is Nabila Fowles Gutierrez, and I've been asked to host this evening's live. So excited to be here and joined by Natasha Rattu. Assalamu alaikum. Hi Natasha. How are
Hi,
you doing?
good, thank you. Great.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. So let me just quickly introduce myself for any of you that don't know me. My name is Nabila Fowles Gutierrez. I'm a divorce coach and director of Divorce Survival. We're an organization that is founded to help families and individuals who are going through relationship breakdown and complicated relationship breakdowns. And we help them to find innovative solutions working alongside law firms and chambers to help them come up with really innovative solutions. And I'm joined, really excited this evening to have been asked to host this live. And we're going to be tackling the very, very difficult issue of domestic abuse, particularly the effect of domestic abuse during this time of lockdown. This year has been crazy and it's really affected so many families and individuals because of this issue. And I'm joined this evening, as I've just mentioned, by Natasha Rattu. So let me just introduce Natasha, who is, I'm really honored to have her here. So Natasha Rattu is the Chief Executive Officer of Karma Nirvana, an award-winning British charity supporting victims of honor-based abuse and forced marriage, offering face-to-face advocacy and professional support. Karma Nirvana also provides training to police, NHS and social services, in addition to raising awareness of and tackling honour crimes and forced marriages. Natasha is a family barrister and has worked in raising awareness on domestic abuse for 15 years. Thank you so much for joining us, Natasha.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and such an important topic that we're covering this evening. So, Natasha, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and tell us what's been happening in your opinion this year with regards to domestic abuse and how that's affected families across the country and cases that you've dealt with.
Sure. So a little bit about Karma Nirvana. We're a national charity. We've been operating since 1993, and we deliver the Home Office's national helpline for victims of honour-based abuse and forced marriage, of which domestic abuse is the umbrella for honour-based abuse and forced marriage. Our helpline is non-judgmental, it's confidential for any man or woman that wants to speak, just to understand what their options are, if they want to leave and they want help in doing that. So there's a range of things that we do at Karma Nirvana. With respect to the last year, it's been a phenomenal year, a year like no other, a year where all helplines, ours included, have seen real increased demand and need. We've seen people that have been locked in with multiple families, extended family networks, where it's been really difficult to get help, really difficult to speak out. There's been limited opportunities to do so. But we've seen more people coming forward than ever, which I think is a real positive, actually, that people feel able and confident to come forward. Because what we know is that this issue is alive and it's there, but historically we haven't seen the same volumes of people coming forward. So we're seeing that now, which is really good. And we've helped this year alone thousands of people, whether it's just to talk to somebody confidentially or to help them to leave an abusive situation. So just a bit of an insight into us and what we do.
So, in terms of reaching out to individuals and families, Natasha, how do they reach out to you? Is it a phone line? Is it face-to-face support? How does it work?
Yeah, so depending on where they live, anybody nationally can ring our helpline or they can email if that's an easier mode of communication. The helpline is usually preferred, but some people, if they find it difficult to have access to a phone or they don't want to be heard, they can email, and emails are responded to really quickly. So that's one way of contacting. If people live in West Yorkshire, we also offer a face-to-face service because we're West Yorkshire based. So that's something else to bear in mind. And for people that want to access that, they can ring the helpline and they can be referred and directed to our advocacy service in that way.
And we'll be providing all the links to all of that support during this live, and also afterwards we'll be touching base with people and continuing to engage in the post. So that's brilliant. So you're offering phone support, email support, and face-to-face support. And how's the face-to-face support been working during this time of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, we had to lock down everything. So most of our staff are now working from home again. Over the summer, we did start working back in our office. Our advocacy worker has started doing face-to-face work again, but shielding. So we provide PPE to be able to do that if that's preferred, and we do all the social distancing that we need to do to enable that to happen. But there was a short period of time where we had to stop that just because of the risk of the virus, and it wasn't safe to do that, but we have started doing face-to-face work again. So if people would prefer that, then that is absolutely open at the moment.
Absolutely brilliant. So, and you've helped thousands of people this year.
Yes.
So have you seen, you're saying people coming forward, do you think that domestic abuse has been on the increase this year? What do you think's happening behind the closed doors?
I think there's two things. I think that we are seeing more domestic abuse occurring because we have people who are locked in with perpetrators all the time, and they have very little opportunity to get away from that environment. So I think that the lockdown has created a real atmosphere and an environment to enable more domestic abuse to take place, and I suppose limited opportunity, or felt limited opportunity, for people to seek help. And I think some people have been worried as well that they've not been able to leave, that they won't be able to get into refuge or into a safe place. So maybe they've had some apprehensions about coming forward, or are waiting for lockdowns, restrictions to start to relax, and they think that might be a safe time. So I think there's lots and lots of different things going on here. I think also there's been real good promotion around the You Are Not Alone campaign that we're supporting the Home Office with, and people are more aware of the number for the National Domestic Abuse Helpline and our helpline more than ever. So all of that has helped people to come forward. But I think it's absolutely correct to say that there is an environment that the coronavirus restrictions place upon households, whereby people are, if they were in a domestic abuse situation before the lockdown, now feel confined to it. And I suppose what we want to say is that that's not the case.
Yeah, and tell us about this really important campaign, and it's got a hashtag You Are Not Alone. So your organization have been working very hard with the Home Office, is that right, to bring this forward, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing this live this evening. So tell us a little bit about that, and also we'll be giving out the helpline number for the domestic violence helpline, etc.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the lockdown, the Home Office were really keen to let people know in their households, if they were experiencing domestic abuse, that they are not alone, and that it's really important that they do come forward. I think recognising how hard it is to come forward and speak to somebody about something so incredibly personal, it can be quite difficult to think, where do I begin? So it was about letting people know that despite the coronavirus restrictions, despite the environment that we're all living in, people are not alone. And if they want to come forward, there is help available. What I'd like to extend on that is that if people want to come forward confidentially, they need to know that they can do that, that they don't have to share too much information that's identifying. They can talk hypothetically. If they just want to know what their options are, there are so many lifelines out there, like our helpline at Calm Nirvana, that can give people that guidance and independence as well. It's a voice that isn't part of your immediate circle, anybody that has a bias. We just want to really help people to be safe. So it's really important, with the You're Not Alone campaign, that people know that all these helplines are available to them.
Yeah, and that they can access them regardless of what's going on with the pandemic. Okay, so I think it's really important because a lot of people misunderstand what domestic abuse is. So, I mean, you're an expert in this, Natasha. So, let's talk together. And I've been working in this area also for sort of 2 decades as well. So, my background is sort of case working, hands-on, and your background also. So let's talk about the different types of domestic abuse so that people really understand, because a lot of people got this confused with violence, and I think we've changed the terminology over the last few years to talk about abuse rather than just violence. So talk to us about the different types of abuse that is identifiable, and what those mean.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nabila. I think people have this misconception in their head. I think the press sensationalized this, that domestic abuse has to be violence. And once upon a time, would call it domestic violence and not domestic abuse. And
Yeah.
that's why the name has changed, to incorporate this range of different ways that a person may face domestic abuse. So domestic abuse can be physical abuse, so violence, such as physically hurting somebody, but it can also be that psychological abuse, playing mind games, making somebody feel that the abuse is their fault. It's because they did something or they behaved in a particular way. It's about the abuser wanting to shift responsibility. One thing I'd like to say, and I'd want viewers to really understand, is that this is not their fault and they are not to blame, but that's all part of the perpetrator and abuser's mind games to make them feel that it's their fault, so they doubt themselves. So that's another form. It can include sexual abuse, whether it's forcing people to do things that they don't want to do, economic abuse, withholding money. It can be controlling their money, their food, their access to friends, families, relatives, decisions, for their life. And the abuser, when we're talking about domestic abuse, the abuser is somebody who, by legal definition, it's somebody that's personally connected. So that is a partner or an ex-partner, but it can also include a family member, an in-law, an extended family member. So if any one of those people are abusing that person emotionally, psychologically, or controlling their movements, that is absolutely abuse. But people don't always recognize that. And I think that's what makes it more challenging to recognize abuse, because people have this very narrow view of what domestic abuse must look like, but actually it's so broad.
It's so much wider. We have the control and coercion side of it, which is it can be very pernicious and very extremely psychologically damaging to a person. It can have lifelong consequences, but it can be so difficult to pin down because it's more of an atmosphere of control, isn't it? There's always the hallmark of any abusive environment is the element of somebody needing to assert their control over another person in all of these ways, right?
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and so it's really useful to understand, and I think it's very important in this session that people, the women and sisters who are listening to this, understand that it's not just about being struck, about violence. That can be a feature, but any of these other issues, the financial control, the coercion, the controlling behavior, psychologically, emotionally abusive behavior, which can, in some examples, can be something like Natasha. I mean, you can also give examples. I've seen in the casework, which it can be literally belittling somebody and putting them down constantly, making them doubt their reality. The gaslighting can be a feature as well, which is, can be very, very nasty, because the person sort of starts to doubt their own sense of reality in their life, and that can be incredibly damaging because it can affect them. So it can be something which to the outside can look very subtle. You might think,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with everything that you've said there. And I think the worry is that there are so many, and this does affect women and girls more than it affects men. It is definitely a gendered issue.
yeah, it's a gendered issue, yeah.
But you'll find that women and girls who don't feel don't have the physical element of it, feel that, well, I've not got broken bones or bruises, I've not been physically hurt. So they almost, on some level, make out that it's not that bad. But any abuse where anybody's controlling you or has ownership of decisions that are not theirs to make, it's not any less harmful because you don't have broken bones or bruises. So it's about people recognizing that here, we need to recognize abuse in its most broadest sense.
Yeah,
And that this absolutely is not about their behavior or their choices or them at all. It is about decisions that the abusers, because that's what these people that do this are, abusers. It's about the decisions that they are making. It's not because they were angry. It's not because of anything other than a choice that they have made. They actively made that choice. So anybody who is experiencing this, they have to own that this is not about their behavior. They are not to blame.
Yes, absolutely. And to reach out and to get that specialist support as early as possible, to be able to, it can be almost very difficult because, in my experience, helping them to see the abuse that they are experiencing can be actually more challenging in some ways than to helping them have that moment where they see the light in a way. That's almost the hardest point, harder than sometimes getting them away from that situation, because once they've made the decision, it actually starts to become a bit easier. But helping them to see that, have you found that in your work, Natasha?
Yeah, we get people who ring the helpline, who ring, for months and months and months, up to a year. We've had people ring until they are ready. And I think what's really important, they need to understand that nobody is going to be telling them on a helpline what they should do or shouldn't do, or criticizing decisions. It's not about that. It's about when the moment is right. And the moment will come whenever they are ready, but it's about knowing, I feel, importantly, knowing what your options are, what you can do when you want to, when you're ready. But even the point that you made there about when you know, and you can make the decision, I feel that there are some circumstances where people leave and there is some of that doubt there. Did I make the right
Yeah,
decision? And it can be
absolutely.
quite hard. So in terms of your healing and your well-being and looking after yourself, it's got to be at that point and beyond, because this is a journey. This is a
It's a
journey.
journey.
Absolutely. So
It's
people need
not
to
an
understand.
event. It's not an event. It's a journey. It's a journey, and it can take years of healing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But getting out of that environment, people question, well, I'm in this environment, I've got children, it's easier, it's manageable, I know it, I can deal with it, and it's just a better situation to be in. But they say that because that's all they know. To live with freedom, to live with choice, to live abuse free is a journey, but it's a journey that you can move into light from and go towards peace from. Whereas when you're in that environment, it's very difficult to grow. Your growth is stunted because the abuser doesn't allow you to grow as a person. So it's really important that people are ready. They make that decision with, like you said, people like us at Common Ivana and others along the way to support them on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And the consequences of living in a toxic environment, because quite frankly, if there's abuse happening, it's toxic, and it's toxic for every person living in that environment as well. Um, is not just, the events that are happening when the perpetrator is abusing or putting the person down emotionally or physically, or whatever the tactics may be. The effects can be physical health,
Mm.
mental health, the children and the rest of the family's mental and physical health. So the impact on every element of your life and the choices you might make on, with your life choices, for instance, career or education, may be impacted on that. So the effects are ripples throughout your life. It's not just that issue that's happening with the perpetrator, right? Am I right? If that's what you've
Yeah.
seen.
Absolutely, it has massive consequences, huge, huge consequences, that get handed down to the next generation.
Yeah,
If they see that this has happened, that doesn't mean to say that they cannot get help to
yeah,
manage what they have seen and what they may have had to process. But it does have an absolute ripple effect. I think another thing that can hold people in is thinking that they can change the abusive behavior, or that they need to
yeah,
change the situation. And that was why I really wanted viewers to listen to the fact that this is not their fault and that they cannot change. It's not about them changing.
other people.
And the perpetrator, the abuser, unless they acknowledge what they are doing is abusive, they cannot get help for what their behavior is unless they recognize it. No matter how many times they say that they're going to change, or I was, angry or drunk, or whatever they say as
You
an
made me do it.
excuse.
You
Yeah,
made me
or
do it is
you
the other
you
one.
behaved like that, or you wore that, or you looked at that person, whatever. This is all about them making a choice, and like you were saying, gaslighting to make the other person feel that it's their fault. They do not need to change. This is not about them. This is about the abuser recognizing that actually, okay, and abusers, you know, if people recognize it, they genuinely recognize it. There is help out there for perpetrators too, but they've got to be able to recognize it. And it is not for the person who is experiencing that abuse to feel like I've got to be the fixer, the healer, the one that's got to change them. That is not your job to do that.
Yeah.
They've got to want to do it for themselves. And you don't have to live in that environment until they change, because that might not happen and it might take a very long time.
It's not your job to change the other person, and that can be a really difficult one for a person, particularly when there's still that love there, or there's still
Yeah,
a lot of strong emotions.
yeah.
That, you know, it's not their job to change the other person. That isn't their job, and it's such a difficult one. Natasha, is it okay if we sort of if we go through some questions? I know that you know, we've had some questions asked of us, and I thought we'd tackle a few of these together and sort of jump in and see what our thoughts are on the questions that come up. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Let's jump in, and there may be some, and I'm just going to put the caveat there. There may be some of these that we decide not to necessarily answer specifically. We may signpost viewers to other services, and because, you know, we have a responsibility and a duty of care to ensure that the information that we give is accurate, and is the best information. And if we can't provide that right now, then we will signpost. So I hope you agree with that as well,
Yeah,
Natasha.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've talked about what are the different types of abuse. So now one of the questions that says, if I report my husband for domestic abuse, how will I stay safe from my husband? My situation has exacerbated in the pandemic, and it is beyond what I can bear. What would you say about that?
So, firstly, I'd really encourage this person to ring our helpline and tell us a little bit more about the situation, because it's really good to give some specific guidance as to what
Yeah.
they can do. For example, if they have children or not, we can give some more specifics on that. If this person, for example, it also really useful to know is what the housing situation is. Do they own the house that they live in? Because there is help whereby the husband could be excluded from the premises so that they have safety in the home. If that's not what they want to do, the other avenue is we can support them to get somewhere safe, so they could go into a refuge, which is a safe space whilst we find more permanent accommodation for this person to resettle them. It could be outside the area if that was felt safest to do. There are also all sorts of injunctions that can be taken out. And injunctions might sound quite frightening, but this all happens in a civil court, so it's not a huge process to get these injunctions out that they might want to
Absolutely.
get. But if they want to get an injunction, there are things like non-molestation orders, occupation orders if they were going to the house. So there's a range of things that are out there and available. Just trying to think about kind of the physical sides of safety. It'd be really also useful to know about what their financial situation is like, because there's a range of financial support packages that can be made available depending on what their circumstances are. At Calm Nirvana, we have some money. If, for example, that person doesn't have the means to use a taxi to get from one place to another, or need train fare, or need whatever they need, we can help with some of those things around their initial plan to exit that situation. And it's really important to call it a plan, because we understand that leading up to leaving can be really an anxious time, where you know that you're going to take this massive brave step, but the perpetrator might not know that. It can also be a really risky time, because if the
Yeah.
perpetrator recognises or realises, so we have to really plan it through. So if you call one of the helpline at Calm Nirvana, we can talk through that plan methodically, step by step, work out everything that we need to work out, whether it's an injunction, a refuge, finances, if there are children involved, what we need to do in respect of them. But I'd really encourage them to ring the helpline, and we can go through the detail with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I would agree with that, because absolutely the risks, we know statistically, the leaving point can absolutely be an inflammatory, very risky time. So planning is essential, and having that time with someone who's calm and is an external influence, somebody like calm, Nirvana, that can really help them to have a cool head to plan things in advance is so helpful. So I've got another question here. Will my children be taken away from me if I allow the abuse to go on? That's a really good question. And I certainly I can give some insight into that as well in the casework that we do in divorce survival.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, just thinking about the phrase, I've got a copy of this question as well. If I allow the abuse, I think this person needs to understand, firstly, they are not allowing the abuse. This is not about them. They are not to blame. And statutory services like police and social care will not be pointing the finger at them or viewing it that they're allowing abuse to happen. They will view that the perpetrator is making a choice and they are being abusive. The fact that this person has been brave and courageous enough to come forward is to their credit. And social care in particular will want to ensure that for a mother, for example, if this is a mother that is fleeing with her children, that they are safe. It won't be about victim blaming or pointing the finger that they've allowed this to happen. So in terms of the planning, if this person wants to leave, that will be factored into the planning. At Carmen of Honour, sometimes we're asked to do assessments of risk because, again, don't want to go talking too much about family law because it's very subjective, but sometimes there can be risk from perpetrators and we can give an expert view on that to the court. For example, if there's an extended family network or particular risks around honour abuse or forced marriage or particular issues, we can also lend that support. But it's really important that this person recognises that they're not being viewed as allowing abuse. The perpetrator is allowing abuse. They will be supported.
It's really interesting. I don't know how much you know about my organisation, Natasha, but we tend to get the cases that have been through the family courts a few times. So we tend to get the ones where the solicitors have just said, we can't deal with this anymore. We've done everything. So we tend to go through the ones, and some of them have been up and down the High Court and, all types of things. And we get those kinds of cases a lot. And, I must say that best practice isn't always followed. Fortunately, that look, this is real life, and in real life, human beings are not perfect. So how the law is applied is not perfect as well. And so my suggestion to this person would be is that absolutely they take a view, in my experience, to put the children's needs and safety first. And that is a very difficult one because when you are being the recipient of abuse, and just like Natasha said, it's not your fault. In my experience, sometimes it can be that they are put in a position where the safeguarding, yes, we will use agencies, and agencies such as Children's Services will be worked alongside with the police. But it's really important that if there's a plan of safety for the children, that the person who has been the recipient of the abuse, I don't like the word victim, I don't know about you, Natasha, but I don't like that word, but we know who we're talking about when we say the victim of the abuse, that any safety plans that have been made around keeping the children safe, that they follow them to the letter. And many of the cases that I've dealt with, where because of the emotional attachment that's still there with the perpetrator, sometimes the agencies such as Children's Services will say, for instance, father not to have contact, we don't advise, until X, Y, and Z happens, we don't advise that the children go to see the father, for instance. And because this person is feeling so guilty about what's happened, they're carrying the guilt. They haven't done anything. However, they're carrying the guilt because we know that that's part of the abuse cycle, that they give contact. And that in 9 times out of 10 of the cases that I deal with in divorce survival, that's unfortunately happened. And I don't know if you've seen that as a feature in the work that you do, where the safety plans have been put in place by agencies, rightly so, but unfortunately, because of whatever issues are happening and control, coercion, manipulation, they're not followed, and the children's welfare isn't always forefront of the family of the victim's mind at that point. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think the challenging thing here is
Very challenging.
it's about recognizing that the person who has faced domestic abuse is on a journey, and this, you know, if for example they are in that situation where they're feeling guilty, or they're feeling these you know, because they've been through trauma, and the body, the mind responds to trauma in different ways, it's really important that they receive support for that. It's quite unusual, in my experience, for courts not to want parents to have contact unless there are circumstances around concerns for the children.
Safety.
Usually, they will always want both parents to have some form of contact, even if it's via letters or however they deem, until they come to the
Indirect.
final hearing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a whole process that the court will undertake to make a decision about what the final outcome will be. But fundamentally here, just kind of going back to the question from the
About
lady
whether the
around,
children will be taken away.
yeah, will the children be taken away? I think the most important thing here is, if this person wants to leave the abusive situation, they want to be safe. I think in making that decision, they're inherently safeguarding for their children is at the forefront of their mind, in addition to them. It might not even be themselves, it might just be about their children. In my experience, it comes to a point where people have this epiphany of, actually, you know, what am I, you know, what will this be, or what will the consequence be to my children? And it's usually children that might give them strength in such a situation. That, you know, I've heard many people that have said that, and that's why they want to then leave. It's about recognizing this as a journey, and that they will have support throughout their process moving forward. And it's not by any means an easy journey, but actually they can begin to rebuild their life and resettle. And organisations like ours and others are there to help them on that journey.
Mhm.
It's not a situation which you can come away from completely, you know, trauma free, because you've been through that. You've been through a very traumatic process. Everybody's journey is absolutely different, but it's about recognizing that it's really important to talk and get therapy, and that's actually a real point to grow in strength on their journey. So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that, Natasha, that I think, you know, as long as, you know, I find that most parents have got the children's, you know, they do put the children's safety and well-being first, and as long as they are following, you know, the advice of agencies that are working with them to keep the children safe, I think that normally, you know, you're in good hands if you are following those plans. It's when people deviate from that to do their own thing that can sometimes, in my experience, that's where, you know, things can go wrong. So if you've been advised, whatever the agencies working with the family are advising to do, if they are advising that those children have witnessed, for instance, domestic abuse, that they have been subjected to violence or threats of violence, and there are risks to the children of harm, by either witnessing or physical harm, that's or in any harm that they are subjected to, that any plans and recommendations from those agencies is followed. And normally, as long as that happens, and that you work with the agencies and collaborate with them, work with them collaboratively to create a safety plan for the family, then you normally be okay, in my experience. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Natasha, but that's my experience.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. So the next question we've got is, what can I report if I have no evidence? This is a really good one. He doesn't hit me, he breaks things and shouts abuse. How will anyone believe me?
So first and foremost, you will be believed. At Carmen Havana, we believe and validate what we're told. We don't question a person's experience. We've trained now 23 police forces across England and Wales. So we would hope that that learning and understanding is being trickled down into police forces. So in
We hope
terms of
so.
Yeah, in terms of evidentially, I'm thinking that this person may be thinking that in order for me to get help to go into a refuge or to flee, I need to prove that I have some sort of physical injury or capture something on a video recording of an argument or whatever. You don't. If you want to get help, you need to call Carmen Ivana. We will find you refuge. We have access to all of the refuge network across the whole of the UK, and we can support you in your transport and accommodation in getting there. If you need police assistance in doing that, we will call them on your behalf and enable all of that to happen. So don't
That's
feel
perfect.
that you need that. If this person is wanting to seek criminal justice and they're thinking evidentially, I want to go to the police for this, they're absolutely entitled to do that, and that's what they're thinking. Um, you know, the police are fantastic at gathering things evidentially for those purposes. It's quite a high threshold of what they have to prove. With that said, they, are absolutely skilled in being able to do that. If that is something that this person is talking about evidentially, I want to take this to the police, what do I need to do? Contact us at Calm Nirvana and we can talk to you about that process and what that entails. Because for us, success is the fact that this person is out and safe. It's not necessarily that we have a criminal conviction. But with that said, we recognise that some people do want that, and that gives them the sense of I've got justice. And I used to, yeah, I used to work for the Crown Prosecution Service. So, in terms of training, our team have thorough training around that process. They can access the helpline and talk to a call handler about that. We can help them.
I think we're going to be doing a lot of work together, Natasha. I can see that in the future. Fantastic. So, so important, the work that you're doing. Okay, let's move on to the next question. My in-laws say that my daughter has to marry an extended relative back home and my husband agrees with them. How can I stop this from happening?
So, fundamentally, a few questions it'd be really good to explore. Age, yeah, first and foremost. This is almost sounding like a forced marriage without knowing whether the daughter is at an age to give their consent or not. All of those things are quite interesting. But if this person doesn't want their daughter to get married, they could get a forced marriage protection order to protect their daughter from that. And again, they're relatively easy to get out. It's again another civil injunction. We can guide you in how that can be done and how the daughter can be
Is that
protected.
done? I'd be interested to know then, Natasha, is that done on an ex parte, as in you can turn up at the court and just get one quickly, like if something needed to be done?
Can be done in both ways. So it's on notice or without notice. So on notice is where you let the other side know that you're going to go to court to take this order out. Now, the risk of that is you're letting the other side know that you're going to get this order out, so that can increase the risk. If you do it without notice, which is the old ex parte, it's where you don't tell anybody and they're done on an urgent and emergency basis. So, yep, you can absolutely do that. Get an order within 24 to 48 hours. The order isn't legally effective until it's been served on the person, so they know what they can and cannot do. And then after the order's been served, it's 14 days that you wait, usually until you go back to court. And then the judge will make a final decision, because any orders that are ex parte without notice are not final orders. They give you that immediate protection for around 2 weeks.
It's an emergency situation, yeah.
Yeah, so that can be done. But if the person is a child, there are other things that can be done as well to keep them safe, because forced marriage is a crime in the UK. That doesn't mean that if you report it to the police, they're going to go in there and start arresting people. But it does mean that there is a lot that can be done to protect that young person, and also just to really encourage the mother for having the courage to come forward, because that can be incredibly difficult in that environment of that pressure of in-laws and the husband, if he also wants this to happen. In the context of that, I think her bravery needs to be recognised, and that be recognised by agencies too. So call the helpline again and we can talk through those steps, get a little bit more detail about the age, timing as well. I mean, one of the blessings of the coronavirus is that there have been travel restrictions, which means that we haven't actually heard as regularly as we have done for the previous years around forced marriage.
Yes.
We're very conscious, though, that that doesn't mean that they're not going to happen. It just means they may all happen at one go when those restrictions lift. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's brilliant. Right, let me just work. Let's see if we can work through some of these, and I'll also have a look through the comments as well. So, what support do I have if I manage to escape? How will I be ensured a place for a shelter?
yeah, so the process for refuge, you can contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. You can contact Carmen Ivana. Most of the helplines have access to a system called Refuge Online, and what we're able to do, we will talk through what your safe areas are, because it might be that, say, you're from Leeds, which is where Carmen Ivana are based. That you need to go to London, to go far away, or Manchester, or actually neither, because you've got relatives or family there. So we need to identify where would be a safe place for you to go. When we've identified the locations, what then happens as a process is we ring the refuge to check if there is space available, and then we will plan, what day you will go, how you will get there.
Yeah.
So even though there is a pandemic, refuges are still open and are still available to people that want to leave. That's just a really important top line for people to take away.
So things are going on in the background. Police are operating as normal, all the emergency services are operating as normal, and the refuge spaces are still available if they can be accessed if needed.
And
Yeah,
just to say that if there are people who don't have recourse to public funding, because that can sometimes be a
that's the
fear.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, that people think, well, I won't have, because in order to get into refuge, you have to access housing benefit, which the person in the refuge will help you to access. But if you come into this country with you don't have indefinite leave to remain, then you won't be able to access housing benefit. However, with that said, there is a rule called the Domestic Violence Concession Rule, which will enable you to get access to funding to go into refuge. We can help you to have access to that. And like I said, we also have like a rainy day fund at Common. If we have somebody in a very desperate situation, we can help to cover some accommodation whilst we work things out. People don't have to worry about, I've got to stay here because I don't have the finances or the ability or the resource. We will find a way to get somebody out.
That's so important. So even women with limited funds and no recourse to public funds you're going to still be able to help. This is brilliant. This is fantastic. We're definitely going to be doing a lot of work together. Very excited about that. So, okay. So we've talked about that. Now, next question is, in my culture, they use religion to say women have to be circumcised. I have to protected my daughter from it, but I've heard that there are actual doctors who perform it. Is this even legal? How can this be reported?
So it sounds like the person is talking about FGM, female genital mutilation, and that is a crime. It's been a crime
Right.
since 1985. And if people, I mean, this person has said specifically, can this be reported? Yes, absolutely, it can be reported. You can report it to police. You can report it to your GP. You can report it to if this there are daughters that are of school age to a school, so it can be reported in that way. It's not legal in any way, shape or form. Even if that child is then taken out of the country and it's performed, it is still illegal. So yeah, really just to kind of answer some of those questions that were posed there, do report it. It's not legal, and there is lots and lots of help available. There are
Yeah,
actually clinics
yeah,
for that.
absolutely. And every professional, that medical or healthcare professional, has a duty of care to report it as well. So that includes GPs, health visitors, midwives. And most of you that know me well in this group know that I'm a midwife as well. So, I mean, that is one of my obligations as a healthcare professional, that if I believe somebody has been at risk of female genital mutilation, that there is a process of reporting that has to take place. As somebody just wanted to ask what female FGM is, as female genital mutilation, that is any form of cutting of the genitals for women, which there's different categories of it, but it comes under the umbrella of FGM. And in some cultures, they believe that it is sort of mandatory or culturally necessary for a woman or a girl to have parts of her genitalia cut. We won't go into all the details, but I'm sure we can have another live about that. But you know, and I'm happy to post links to that as well. So it is a criminal offence, and it should absolutely be reported. You'll get a lot of support if you actually go and reach out to your GP or the healthcare professional as well. They'll have a lot of clout behind them to help you to prevent that as harm as well. Brilliant. Okay, so my in-laws make my life hell. I feel like I cannot breathe. I'm their slave and they control my whole life. I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place because speaking out against them might ruin my marriage and cause a furore in my community. I will be ostracized so much that I won't be able to escape through, and my children will suffer, and will suffer long term. What do you think about that, Natasha?
It sounds like this person is living in a very suffocated environment. They have children, and so many things running through this person's mind around ostracism, around their marriage, around harm that their children will face in the longer term. I think it's really important that one, this person recognises that this is abusive behaviour from their in-laws. It'd be really good to have a discussion about this person's husband around, if there is any support offered. Is the husband also exposed to any abuse from in-laws? Does he or she want to leave as well, or not? And if not, and the fear about ostracism and disownment is such a huge fear that many people have, but I think it's really important to recognise that actually this is a generational harm that gets passed down quite often to younger generations, and it often requires somebody of strength and ability to be able to kind of break that tradition of harm being handed down.
Yeah.
And if that means being ostracized, but you change things for the next generation, and by no means am I saying that making it sound so easy. I just say it from a place of experience. And I'll just very quickly share a personal example. My mum was ostracized at the age of 15. She ran away from home, and she's not spoken to her family since she left. Now, for me, what that has meant is that I've been able to live life on my terms and to make decisions for myself. Had my mum not have done that when she did at 15, it might have been myself that had to make that decision to cut myself free from that generational harm that gets passed down. I kind of look back, and she looks back at, with hindsight, difficult decision to make at the time. But actually today, for the freedoms that it gives today and the life that it gives today, for people that are disowned or that have faced disownment, it's a journey, but there is a community of people that are in that same position. And at Calm Nirvana, we do network survivors together as well, because we stand in solidarity and strength. So it's about people recognising that, this is a chain that they can break if they feel ready to, if they want to. And there is absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, really, your mum must be so proud of you. Just wow. Yeah, amazing. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through because we've only got like 7 minutes left, and we're getting this sort of timed out.
There was one question in the chat just about clarifying if a 17-year-old who gives consent after being groomed by one parent or feeling pressured, is this a forced marriage? Just to say that the definition of a forced marriage is where one or both parties do not, or if they have a learning disability, cannot give their consent. And pressure, in the question, it's about if one person's feeling pressured, that is duress and coercion, so that would still be categorised as a forced marriage. One of the things that we're campaigning for at Calm Nirvana is to end child marriage. So at the age of 17, that's also technically a child marriage too. So to make those 2 points.
Well, that is really, really brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I mean, Natasha, this has been such a great session. I don't know if we've got time for one more question from the ones that we've received in advance. And if you can have a glance through whilst I'm looking at these and choosing the best one, and then perhaps we can answer 2 more questions. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
so I've got here, it says, my brother, this is a really important one. All right, I'm going to go for this one. How can I recognize signs of sexual abuse in my child? He's been exhibiting behaviors such as putting his finger in his backside and smearing poo, stroking his penis and saying it is fun. He's only 5. I do not know if this is normal for a boy, if this is bad behavior or if this is something more sinister. So that's a
It,
really difficult
yeah,
one.
it is a difficult question without knowing a little bit more about the context to it. So, clearly this could be a sign of something more sinister. It could be that this child is exhibiting behaviour that is being encouraged. So it's really important to probe this a little bit more. I think it'd be good to signpost actually this
I
person
I
to.
think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Who would you sign? Because I'll certainly signpost right now in this
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely. So there are child helplines available, like the NSPCC or Childline, that they could ring and get some advice. Because I think without more context, it's difficult to know. I would like to ask some more questions to
Exactly.
understand some more context and some history, because these are clear concerns. But it'd be good, I think, for this person that's commented with this question just to explore that a little bit more with somebody who is a specialist in child behaviour.
Yeah, I think so. My first hunch in terms of being a healthcare professional as well myself is to actually take the child to the GP. So find the GP in your practice that you feel comfortable with and go and have a conversation with that healthcare professional. Another really good one, if the child is at school, and a very powerful professional that is at hand for any parent, is a school nurse. So the child is 5, so they would have probably reached the top threshold now for health visitor, although you still could discuss that with a health visitor. They're a very powerful public health professional, but also the school nurse, because they are then able to escalate those things through the correct channels, children's services, do assessments, and keep an eye on that child in the school environment, away from the home, so that they can observe if there are any concerns. And essentially that could be a very good way of managing it. What do you think about that, Natasha?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, fantastic. So is there any, because we've got 3 minutes left now, I don't know if you've spotted any other questions that you wanted to answer from the thread, because there's so many. We've had like 45 comments in this chat, and I'm going to be engaging with them throughout the evening, I think.
Yeah, I'm just looking through some of the questions. So um, there's somebody that's put that their brother is violent. He's in his late teens, and we're all scared of him, especially my mum. The mum experiences physical abuse, but she won't let them report him. What can we do? And it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we don't know the age of this person that's sent this message in, if they are a child as well. But it's really important to recognise that this is domestic abuse, and that the brother's violent behaviour, he's in his late teens, can also be that he needs to get a help really for his behaviour. He is also a child. Um, so it would be really useful if she could ring again one of the helplines confidentially so we could talk through. And she doesn't have to share her name or anything
Yeah.
disclosing, but just to know what support is available in more detail to her situation is available, because it sounds to me that this person may feel quite trapped because it doesn't sound like mum wants them to report it. It feels like this person could be feeling like they can't talk, or that nobody will listen, or just a little bit stuck. So I'd be really encouraging them to seek help confidentially. And when they feel more confident to share as much as they want to, they can share as much as they want to, however long that takes. But I'd be really encouraging them to get some to have a conversation with Helpline.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think, to lift this has been such a brilliant session, and thank you, Natasha, you've been fantastic. But for me, the thing that's been so encouraging about this is to lift that veil of sort of secrecy around this and to get the conversation started, because it's that first step of starting the conversation, and you don't know where those powerful conversations will lead in your life. And it's just taking that first step, just watching this video, interacting with the post, sending personal messages or anonymous questions to the admin in this fantastic group. This group is unique. Muslim Mamas is an international network of amazing support network for mothers and women across the globe. And so, the impact that we could potentially have just by starting this conversation, not necessarily offering prescriptive solutions, but to be able to engage with the community and give them an opportunity to start the conversation. I feel that that's one of the biggest takeaways from today's session for me. What about you, Natasha?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about people feeling confident to just have that first conversation. There's no pressure to share too much. You can share whatever you feel like sharing. And it might be that, we have people that ring and put the phone down. It takes time to build that confidence before you say a single word. So just recognizing that there is help available, they're not alone, and we really want them to help to get the help that they need, because they don't deserve to live in a toxic or abusive environment. They absolutely
Yeah.
don't.
No, absolutely. And just, you're not alone. This hashtag, this campaign is, we're going to be posting more information about it in this thread. All the telephone numbers to call, and obviously, Natasha, the work that you do is fantastic. I really can't wait to contact you after this so we can work together with some of the clients that we're working with in divorce survival as well. So it's been my pleasure to host you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Um, yes, thank you. And I wish you a restful few days before the new year kicks off. And I hope that you and your family are safe from this horrible virus, and that, that you continue to grow in your work and go from strength to strength. Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, I think we'll love you all and leave you there. Salaam alaikum to all the sisters. Stay safe and engage with this campaign. It's such an important campaign. And I hope that we've been, inshallah, of service to you this evening and started those conversations across the community. So, inshallah, we can lift this very important veil of secrecy around domestic abuse, and to help you and your communities to be more empowered and more informed, so that you can make the best choices, inshallah, and help to support each other in our journeys. Take care, all the best, lots of love, and wishing you a much better 2021. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We have, yeah, we've stopped the recording, so that's all good.
You.